Funny, I had some.
Hello and welcome everyone to today's expert panel around trusting your data. My name is Nadine Lafleur and I work for Talend Australia and New Zealand. And today I have the expert panel with me, and we have Arq Fazackerley, also from Talend Australia and New Zealand. He's the Regional Vice President for our local operation. We have James Hartley, Head of Data Engineering at Arq Group. And we also have Lawrence Eva, who's the Principal Consultant for Data and Analytics at Arq Group. Very shortly, we'll be starting our Q&A. So you can add any of your questions into the tab on the right-hand side, and we'll address them in due time if we get around to it. If not, we can address them later down the track. In the meantime, I invite you to participate in a little poll that we've prepared for you today. So we'd like to know what the estimated number of data sources is that your company draws from to feed your business intelligence and your analytics. So I repeat the question: how many data sources does your company draw from to feed your business intelligence and analytics? So you can see the poll on the right-hand side. And while we're waiting for the poll results here, I'd quickly like to thank our sponsors for providing the insights today. So our first sponsor is Arq Group, and Arq Group is a leading digital professional services company with deep expertise in mobile data analytics and cloud. Arq Group is also one of Australia's most awarded AWS premium consulting partners. Now, our second sponsor today is Talend. Talend is a leader in data integration and data integrity. And Talend is also on a mission to change the way the world makes decisions. Talend Data Fabric brings together in a single platform all the necessary capabilities to deliver complete, clean, and uncompromised enterprise data to all users and systems in real time. So thank you to the sponsors and our panelists today, and thank you for entering your answers into the poll. So let's see what the results are for our poll today.
Looks like we've got a lot of data sources out there. I think it's an interesting question, and I guess as an introduction to myself, to those of you on the call, I've spent over 20 years in the BI and analytics space before moving into the plumbing, if you like. And it's really interesting, you know, when you try and pull reports out of all these multiple sources. And I think, Oliver, if you could put up the first slide for us, would be good. Interestingly enough, the average, so this is a number of reports here. The first one is done by Arq Group across companies of 1,000 staff or more. And across these organizations, they discovered that, in fact, more than 400 data sources was the average. And further to that, more than 20% of them had actually more than 1,000 data sources that they were trying to pull together to give a view of their data landscape and their data estate, which is a pretty astonishing amount. And of course, what that in turn has led to is, you know, the cost of shadow IT as many of the folks in the business look to try and pull this data together for their reports. Of course, lost revenues through bad data because the data is not necessarily timely. And I guess that the fourth thing that we see there is a report from the McKinsey Group, you know, where they suggest that 45% of data transformation projects fail due to an inability to grasp the scale of the project. So interesting statistics, and thank you for your input on that. Look, I'd turn that back over to the panel for any other observations.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else have a view on the stats that we've just seen here? It sounds like an incredible amount of data that's being collated here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's really exciting about the environment at the moment is that a lot of those data sources are being opened up, and we're looking at very different types of data as well, such as opening up the ability to look at semi-structured data and even unstructured data and derive insights from it as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, look, I would guess that if we took this poll in a year or two, I mean, those numbers would climb even more, right? I mean, the only truth that you're seeing in data at the moment is that it's exponential, and there's more and more data sources you need to plumb into, which makes data quality and trust in your data, this talk even more important.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence and James. Now moving to the topic of trust in data. The question that I have here is, what does trust in data mean to you, and why is it important? Let's start with Mark on that one.
Thanks very much, Nadine. Look, I guess, again, back to 20 years in the BI and analytics space. Interestingly, you know, as I'm sure most of you know, CIO magazine runs an annual poll of CIOs that are a member of their community, and asking them what are the top things on their minds. And for the last 20 years, in the top 5 has been analytics. It's never moved. And in that time, we've gone from very basic tools like essentially SQL generators through to tools like Tableau and Click at the front end, and yet we still don't seem to be getting it right. So it's clear that, you know, folks are still turning up to meetings with spreadsheets and arguing about the data. It's not the tool on the front, it's actually the underlying data platforms and infrastructure. And I think that's what's so exciting about today, is that we're able to now take that to a place where a few years ago we couldn't do that kind of integration. So that's my view. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. What about you, James? Why do you think that trusted data is so important today?
I think you know, trust in data is really making sure that as a business and as a decision maker, you're having confidence in that data that you're using for decision making. And I think really in terms of what that means under the cover is trust is built upon having known quality. It's built upon knowing where the data comes from. It's built upon knowing the definitions behind the numbers that you're seeing. And I think all those things coming together are important because they enable self-service to data and effective decision making based on fact.
Yeah, good point, James. Lawrence, any take on from your side on that one?
Yeah, look, some of the thoughts on my side. Trusted data is really being able to know that what you're using the data for, you can trust the underlying quality of it. And that's not to say everything needs to be of the highest quality. You know, it definitely needs to be a fit for purpose sort of thing. You know, financial departments would have a higher bar for data quality, and they need to be able to trust that data down to the cent. But, you know, different departments, such as marketing, maybe, that are using it for different purposes, they can get away with a little, with a different level of data quality. So trusting data means different things to different use cases. But overall, it's for the purpose that you're talking about. It's that you trust that it's accurate enough for your purposes.
Yeah, that's a good point. From my standpoint, being in marketing, we'd like to have the data perfect, but obviously it needs to be there timely as well. So it's always a bit of a balance to have. Now, our next question would be, what does data? What does that trust in data actually translate to in terms of business value? Starting with you, Mark.
How does that translate into business value? Look, I think if we pop up the slide here, I think there's a very topical case study we have from AstraZeneca. And I think AstraZeneca is a name that we're all familiar with. Next slide, please, Oliver. Thank you very much. I mean, AstraZeneca, very topical at the moment. Interesting thing for them, you know, they run clinical trials on hundreds of drugs. They have grown significantly through acquisition, as have many companies throughout the world today, continually acquiring and divesting organisations, which means, of course, their data is in multiple repositories in multiple divisions of their organisation. They had multiple CRM systems, multiple instances of SAP. So a real data landscape that was problematic at best for them, particularly when it came to things like getting clinical trial data together. Implementing Talend, they were able to actually accelerate that process significantly to actually bring drugs to market much, much quicker by having the data available to them. As you can see there, shortened planning cycles from 15 days to 3 hours. And every month that they shave off clinical trials more than $1 billion in savings to AstraZeneca, which of course translates into more investment in research and development so they can bring additional drugs to market. So very strong business case there. You know, every dollar they spent, a $40 return. Hard to sort of fault the investment on that front. I hope that makes sense from a business value perspective.
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Mark. That's very good insights here from AstraZeneca. What about James? What is your take on the business value of trust and data?
Thanks, Nadine, and thanks, Mark, for that example. Very topical at the moment, but I think one that I'll bring from our experience over the past couple of years is that we've been working with one of the big four banks, where, of course, data and trust in that data is really critical. And I'll use the example in this case of a regulatory framework from APRA called CPG 235, which is really about managing the data risk within an organisation, and that extends to specific metrics around how good the data is, and to Lawrence's point earlier, whether it's sufficient in quality for the type of uses it's going to be put to. So in terms of the business value here, it's really avoidance of any regulatory enforcement action from APRA and maintaining compliance with their license conditions, and obviously the public image consequences that would go around getting these things wrong. So critical for that organisation.
It'd be fair to say bankers suffer from a reputation like at the best of times, right, James? Let alone having bad data.
Yes, sometimes.
Thanks for the insights. From your perspective, Lawrence, being at the coalface with customers, have you walked into a business where there is a lack of trust in their data? And what did it take to turn that situation around in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I'll try and speak up because I've been told it's hard to hear me, so hopefully it's a bit better now. Look, it's one of the key reasons why we get engaged with companies, right? Some level of trust of data, of lack of trust of data is in there, right? And it can vary depending on where they are in the sort of security curve, the data maturity curve. Companies right at the beginning, where they're really starting on their data maturity journey, they're using data by themselves. Individual departments might trust their data because they're extracting it themselves. They're doing everything to massage it and transform it the way they want to. They're doing it themselves, right? So they trust it, but high levels within the organization don't have that trust of consistency because they don't have visibility, right? So the visibility and consistency are the key things that are needed to turn things around. And initially, there's the engineering components of that that we can talk about, but also just the language of what data quality means. Using a data governance framework and a definition of data quality, accuracy, completeness, timeliness, consistency. All of these things might not be considered, depending on the company. So you need to start spreading that message and making people understand these are all the facets of data quality. On the other end of the spectrum, you'll have large companies that we're engaged with that have many generations of data platforms and on the data journey. And, the question there is, in addition to just the data quality, accuracy, completeness, is I can't even find the data, right? So how can I trust that the data is right? There might be 5 versions of the same data set. My problem is I don't know which one to trust. I don't know what area of the business has done what to what piece of data, right? So it definitely varies. It depends on the use case. What I will say is it can take quite a lot to turn around, but I think the fundamentals, going back to that, understanding accuracy, completeness, timeliness, I think those are key things, and something that we've seen even when people are investing in new platforms, new capability, big data, cloud. You still hear the same things that you heard 20 years ago on on-premise data warehouses. I don't have the data on time. I'm not sure what happened to this data set, right? So it doesn't matter what capability or software we're using, it's still the same data quality questions that we're coming in to answer and help guide.
Yeah. And sorry, I might just also add to that as well. I think Lawrence alluded to it as well, but there's a massive, in some cases, a massive business change activity and change management activity associated with putting in place new platforms and new technologies to really get those advocates out in the business and getting the rest of the business to accept that this new data or this new platform is now trustworthy.
I guess I'm going to pop in with a question here, even though I'm not the moderator. I mean, Lawrence and James, I mean, data quality means different things to different people, doesn't it? I mean, you know, what's that Facebook adage, never let perfection be the enemy of good? Is that, how does that work in the data quality world?
Yeah, look, I'll throw another quote from you, like a financial department that use data from a data platform once told me it's better to be consistent than accurate, right? And from their perspective, it was almost they used the same data set that was steady and had the same behavior. We introduced, you know, data that was higher quality, but actually showed that, you know, they were missing certain values or, you know, some records, and that caused alarm bells across the organization. So it's quite interesting people's perspective on data quality. And I guess my point on that is change management, as James says, is really important. You can't just say, just bang, this is a better data quality, better data set, better data quality. You're gonna have to engage with people, tell them why it's better, have the reconciliation to prove that it's better. Almost, you know, it's change management is almost as hard as the engineering aspects of data quality.
Great. All right, thanks everyone. We have the next question here. In your experience, what types of businesses, are there any particular types of businesses or any specific sectors that you think have different or significant needs for trusted data? We'll start with you, James.
Great, really good question, and I think it's really, really broad. We're seeing demand for higher trust in data and higher quality in data across many sectors. So I'll name just a few. I think those organisations and those sectors where digitisation is becoming more prevalent are excellent candidates, because you start to automate a process and you remove, as you automate that process, you remove the human who can check the data as it goes along and intervene if there are any problems. So that, you know, for example, I'll use the example of energy or banking, where they're starting to deliver the customer data record and banking transferability capabilities. They're opening up a whole load of new data that they never had to open up before to other organisations and their peers, and they're going to have to make sure that that data is accurate about their customers, so that their customers are able to accurately compare and switch products. So I think that's one example. So across banking and energy, so those highly regulated industries. And I think the other example that I might bring up is government as well. There's been a trend over the past 5 years or so that has accelerated, where government is realising that data is really at the core of deciding policy, and they're starting to look at using data to define particular policy directions. And examples of that are where New South Wales has established the Data Analytics Centre, the DAC, and Victoria has established VCDI, the Victorian Centre for Data Insights. Those organisations are looking at the information and collecting it from across government sometimes with a mandate, a legislative stick, if you like, to require data be provided to them. And they're using that information to decide a future direction for government policy. For example, intervention in families, for example, is one such area I'm aware of. So I think those are some of the example sectors that we're seeing it in.
Great, thanks, James. Mark, from a talent perspective, what are some of the customers that you can maybe bring up in this scenario, certain sectors or certain business environments?
Yeah, thanks, Nadine. Look, I think James' observation is very relevant. You know, we talked about the fact that any company's a data company, really, these days. I mean, I think we look at the kind of organisations that are dealing with data. It's very broad. We have everything from retailers to financial service to government. I mean, there's quite a famous case called Jeansgate in the UK with Marks and Spencer, which some of the listeners may be aware of, where a social media and soap star was sponsoring a particular brand of jeans that Marks and Spencer were bringing to market. And so they pre-booked their months-long advertising regime on all the media platforms, and in due course got the jeans in stock, and the social media star published that up to her followers, sold out within a week. And so they had 3 weeks of advertising running with no stock, and unable to get the stock because their supply chain was not optimized, the information flow was not adequate to keep up with demand, and it cost the cheaper marketing of that Marks and Spencer retailer cost her job at the time. So, you know, all of the organisations now moving to cloud and online. I mean, imagine how many organisations are dealing with Zoom call data right now. I mean, everybody's got Zoom data being captured somewhere, or Microsoft Teams or WebEx. We have remote workers. So it's a very broad spectrum. And I think I come back to every data is going to be a data company moving forward. Every company is going to have to deal with it and how they integrate it.
Thanks, Mark. Now we have this slide up on the screen that was to address the next question. So maybe I'll just let you continue, Mark. So what are some of the technology solutions that can help address the need for that trusted data?
Yeah, sure. So look, you can see there, Talend Data Fabric is a term, and Data Fabric is a term that was first coined a few years ago by Gartner and Forrester and other analysts, I guess, to describe something a little more broader than a data mesh, which has been a terminology in use for quite some time. As to describe a sort of a cross-platform, multi-infrastructure data environment. So now we have, most organisations have data on-prem, they have data in cloud, they may have data in third-party repositories that are being stored on their behalf. And how do we pull all that together and create a data fabric, if you like? We'll weave it together into a single lake or a single instance that we can derive value from. And there are many vendors with partial offerings in the space. For instance, there are quite a number of ingestion tools, or quite a number of API tools and governance, but Talend is the only vendor that actually has an offering across the full spectrum, from the data ingestion, where we pull the data out of the data sources, right through to the API or business intelligence layer, where we surface the data for those end users. And I think it's important that we have that, because then the end users can actually understand where the data's come from. We have a unique proposition in the Talend Trust Score. We have an AI engine in behind our data inventory product that assesses data as it's pulled in and works out, you know, how trustworthy is it, alongside how accurate it is, and alongside of inputs from users and how often it's used. For instance, all the users in the field can actually give the data a rating. Do we believe this to be trustworthy? Because at the end of the day, it's the folks in the business that actually understand the data and understand whether it's accurate or not. We're just providing it, you know, the water for the bucket that they then got to have a look at. So, you know, providing those tools that provide some governance to business users is very important, and that then feeds back into the trust score, so that data users and consumers can understand the quality of the data they're using, and that may vary a lot from a, you know, 98% to, well, 60% is good enough. So many aspects in there. You know, I think one of the key aspects there is that end-to-end solution. Most folks are going to start small, but you need to plan to build big. Is my view.
Fabulous. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. James, what is your point of view in regards to technology solutions addressing the issue of trusted data?
I think Mark's covered a number of the solutions very, very well. So I think I might also bring something in slightly left of field, which is to talk about the accelerating pace of business decisions. So we need to be able to effectively analyse the quality of this data faster and sooner. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the fact that that we can look at some of those streaming integration tools as well to be able to acquire that data from the source systems and be able to analyse it and make an assessment of the quality of that data before it gets any further. But I think Lawrence may also have a point of view on this as well.
Yeah, thanks, James. Like, I think one thing, like, definitely, you know, there's engineering capability to track data and monitor data, and that's grown leaps and bounds lately. But one point that Mark mentioned, like, I've seen a lot of success where you have tools that actually allow users to tag which data sources they trust. And Mark mentioned that as a feature of Talend. There are other tools on the market that do that. I think the benefit of that is that, you know, the engineering side, it can be large programs to, you know, re-architect your engineering pipeline and then integrate the data quality and then feed that into your dashboard, right? But you have thousands, you have, you know, hundreds of users that are using data every day. And almost like a social network, they can say if things are good or bad, right? And the good tools that I've seen can actually say that, like social influencers on social media, that these people are really trustworthy when they endorse or do not endorse something, right? And that can be an accelerator to get people understanding what data is good or bad really quickly ahead of, you know, the large program to re-engineer pipelines and that sort of thing. So different approaches, and some that can, you know, have immediate benefits while you do the large project to do the engineering side as well. So.
Thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, that social validation, I think, is a very interesting one. We have the time for another poll here. So our next poll for today will be, what impact has a lack of trustworthy data had on your business over the last couple of years? So we've got a little bit of time for everyone to fill in this question. And while we're waiting, feel free to also add any other questions that you may have for the panel into the questions tab on the right-hand side. So we're almost nearing the end of our questions. So if there's anything else that you'd like to know today, we have our expert panel here. Feel free to hammer them with any questions that you may have. And let's close the poll in the next 10 seconds, if that's all right. So last chance, what impact has a lack of trustworthy data had on your business over the past couple of years? All right, let's close the poll now. All right, I'll just open up.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll just open up to our panel again. So Mark, James, Lawrence, maybe we'll start with James this time. Any feedback on what you're seeing in terms of results here?
I think it's interesting. No one's ranked it low, which is effectively what I expected. But I actually thought that this is actually a very good demonstration with regards to making sure that we have all the aspects of definitions of data in place to make it trustworthy. Because all these words here, low, high, moderate, extreme, we haven't offered a definition One person's high could be another person's low. One person's extreme could be another person's moderate. So I think this is a great example of, yes, we've got a feeling here, but we've not got an necessarily actionable piece of information. So I think this is, by accident almost, a demonstration of one of the aspects of trust in data that's very important and can be solved with things like data catalogues and metadata on top of the information stores and reporting that you have.
So no metadata, James, on what high means here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty interesting though, isn't it, that 70% of the folks that responded said it's high or extreme. And I guess that's why you're on this call for the listeners here, because you want to know more about how this works. So yeah, 70%, I'd love to know what that looked like and the revenue implications for the organisation's concerned. I'm sure that would be dramatic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely no surprises there. As Mark says, you're on this call because you're interested in data, and it drives your business, right? We're all, a lot of the business that we're working with are trying to get to being a data-driven business, which means that it just becomes more critical, and issues just affect your whole business. It's not one little section of your business. It's fundamentally the whole of your business now. Yeah.
Great, thanks everyone. We've got another question here. What are some techniques and frameworks to help educate your wider teams and organize the entire organization on trust in data? If I just do a round robin with that one, starting with Lawrence.
Sure. So a lot of our engagements with customers around this are sort of data governance type engagements, right? Where you're actually establishing that framework and standards for them to understand and manage data, right? Some aspects of that are what we've discussed before, so quality and metadata. But even, we mentioned briefly about ownership and then what responsibilities are of people that own data, what they should be doing and what they should be doing in terms of monitoring data quality and data issues. There's a very standard framework that can be applied. That's an industry standard, and what we do as a company in terms of Arq is look at your problem space and tailor and implement aspects of that data governance framework into the company, right? Because the whole hog, as always, is complex and can be time consuming, but if we understand what are your key issues with data or your key pain points with data, then we can focus on which aspects of that are the things to implement first.
Thanks, Lawrence. Mark, what about talent?
Yeah, I think you've got to start from the business end for most folks. I mean, we can talk about the impact of data as technical folk a lot, but I think until you translate it into what the business outcome is, and I mean, the polls kind of answered that question in many ways. And if the impact has been high, then being able to demonstrate the if you like, the delta between the current situation and the business impact, what a future situation might look like if the data was more trustworthy. That's how you're going to get the folks in the business on board, by actually demonstrating to them, this is the business outcome we currently have, and if we had the appropriate data, this is what it would look like. So let us help you to understand how to get from there to there. And here are the things that we need to do in these discrete chunks, and data education, data awareness, and if you like, actual data governance by the business. How do we go in and actually help improve that data score? Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. James.
Yeah, I think the guys have covered a lot in their responses already. I think maybe one of the things that I might just touch on here in terms of driving an appreciation of trust in data and data quality out into the organisation is really to pick parts of the organisations that are perhaps feeling the most pain at the moment, and working with them to improve the trust in data and the quality of their information and decision making, and effectively turn them into an exemplar where they become the shining light that everyone wants to follow within the organisation, and you build up momentum like that by effectively recruiting the business to be your best advocate for trust in data. So you work out from that exemplar, and you start putting in place champions and all that sort of thing to follow up.
Agreed.
Good point. Good point. Our final question here. So we have 7 minutes on the panel to go today. What I'd like to do is just go around again at each of the three of you and just find out what your one key takeaway or advice will be for the audience today. If we have any other questions, we can address those thereafter. If you just want to pick out one thing that you'd like to highlight that you'd like the audience to walk away with today. Start with James.
Great, thank you. I think it's such an interesting topic and so much under it, it's hard to pick one. But I think really it's probably that concept just mentioned earlier. Understand you're never going to fix this all at once, I suppose. Pick those parts of the organisation or those business processes that are most affected or most held back or could most improve through a trust in data exercise or a quality improvement exercise, and focus on that, and then iterate and broaden it out across the organisation, and consider it a continuous process rather than a project that has a particular end date, but more something that goes on into the future once you've built that platform to work from.
Thanks. Redirecting to Mark. So your one key takeaway for the audience today?
Well, I think James kind of hit it on the head there, really. I mean, it's a program, not a project. You know, it's got to be something that's ongoing. Every company is a data company. Everybody's got a lot of data. So my word of advice is start small but plan to build big. You may only be building a cottage now, but you need to put the foundations for a skyscraper, because the data flows are only going to get more.
Thanks, Mark. Lawrence, any word of advice for our audience today to finish off the discussion?
Yeah, look, I mean, James and Mark's points are right, what I would initially say. So I'll take a little bit of a different slant for the audience here. And I'd say that, look, technology, you know, along with data is just changing all the time, right? There's always a new tool, there's always a new platform, there's always a new capability there. And, you know, CTOs, CIOs, management, CIOs, they're all going to be very interested in pursuing these new shiny toys, right? Underlying that, data quality just can wreck any of those new toys and capabilities at a moment's notice, right? And as soon as you lose trust in the outputs of that new shiny toy, it's very hard to get it back. Okay, so you know, definitely pursue all of those things, but always remember underlying it, data quality and data trust. You've got to address that. That can't be an afterthought, which, you know, sometimes it still is. It can't be an afterthought in whatever new IT project that you're doing. Data quality is a fundamental thing that you're going to have to take care of in your project.
New shiny toys.
I do like that expression.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Anything else that you'd like to add to this?
No, start small, grow big, plan for the future.
Fantastic. All right, thanks everyone. This concludes our expert panel today. So thank you again for participating in this discussion, to our three panelists and our two sponsors. Arq Group will be in touch with everyone over the next coming week. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed the discussion, the key takeaways, and this should be the start of a conversation which will help you on your journey through trusted data. So have a great day ahead, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye for now.